In the vast expanse of the Milky Way galaxy, an powerful organization known as the Galactic Council held sway over countless star systems and civilizations. Composed of representatives from the most advanced alien races, the Council's stated purpose was to maintain peace and order throughout the galaxy. However, beneath this noble facade, the Council hid a dark and terrible secret. For decades, the Galactic Council had been quietly carrying out a horrific program of mass infanticide on a scale unimaginable to most sentient beings. On remote, desolate planets scattered across the galaxy, the Council operated secret facilities where millions of innocent children from subjugated races were brutally slaughtered each year. The reasons for this atrocity were known only to the highest echelons of the Council's leadership, but rumors circulated of ancient prophecies, foretelling the rise of a being who would one day overthrow the Council's tyrannical rule. To prevent this prophecy from coming to pass, the paranoid Council sought to exterminate all potential threats while they were still young and helpless. Through a vast network of spies, informants, and collaborators, the Council identified and rounded up children from species deemed likely to produce the prophesied savior. These innocent younglings were torn from their families and transported to the Council's clandestine death camps, never to be seen again. For years, the Galactic Council's heinous crimes went undetected and unpunished. But everything changed when a small group of human infiltrators stumbled upon one of the Council's extermination centers. What they witnessed there shocked and sickened them to their core. Piles of tiny, lifeless bodies stacked like cordwood. Industrial incinerators belching greasy black smoke as they consumed the remains of the dead. Heartless guards and cold-eyed functionaries going about the business of mass murder with clinical detachment. The human operatives managed to escape the charnel house with video evidence of the Council's atrocities. When this horrifying footage was broadcast across Earth and its colonies, people were outraged. Billions called for the Council's blood and demanded swift retribution for the murdered children. Earth's leaders vowed to make the Council pay for its unforgivable crimes. Overnight, humanity united against the Galactic Council with a single purpose: vengeance. All political, national, and ideological differences were cast aside in the face of this affront to human decency and compassion for the innocent. The people of Earth and its settlements were galvanized into action like never before. Massive warships were assembled in secret shipyards. Weapons of devastating power were forged in hidden factories. Legions of soldiers, pilots, and operatives were recruited and trained, all sworn to bring the Council to justice or die trying. Hatred for the Council and its callous disregard for innocent life burned hot in every human heart. As humanity girded itself for a war of retribution against the Galactic Council, the Council's spies brought troubling reports to their masters. They spoke of an unprecedented military and industrial mobilization taking place throughout human space. Fleets of powerful new warships rendezvousing in remote star systems. Entire populations whipped into a frenzy of righteous anger and bloodlust. Some on the Council urged caution and attempts at diplomatic rapprochement. But the human emissaries sent to open talks were stone-faced and uncompromising in their demands. The children's killers must be handed over for trial and execution, they said. The Council's leaders must resign in disgrace. Humanity would assume stewardship over the Council races to prevent future atrocities. The Council must submit to occupation and govern itself according to human directives. Refusal to comply would mean war on a scale never before seen in galactic history. Faced with such unthinkable humiliations, the enraged Council voted for war against the upstart humans. All human diplomatic personnel were expelled from Council space. Humanity's demands were rejected utterly. The mighty fleets and armies of the Council's member races were called upon to mobilize to crush the human threat once and for all. And so the stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the galaxy and decide the fate of trillions. Lines were drawn, loyalties were declared, and the countdown to oblivion began. In the face of the Council's monstrous crimes, could humanity prevail and gain its vengeance for the murdered innocents? Or would the Council succeed in stamping out the human resistance and cementing its bloody rule over the stars? Only time would tell as the opening shots of the cataclysmic struggle echoed across 1,000 worlds. In the wake of the shocking revelation of the Galactic Council's child massacres, the people of Earth and its colonies burned with a righteous fury. United in their determination to bring the Council to justice, they began to organize a resistance movement unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. On a heavily fortified base hidden deep within an uncharted asteroid field, the leaders of the newly formed human resistance gathered to plan their next move. Battle-hardened veterans, brilliant strategists, and impassioned activists put aside their differences and worked together towards the common goal of toppling the Council's brutal regime. The resistance knew that they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned by the Council's forces. To stand any chance of victory, they would need to be smart, agile, and unconventional in their tactics. They began by establishing a network of spies and informants within the Council's ranks, gathering vital intelligence on their enemies' strengths, weaknesses, and plans. Using this information, the Resistance launched a series of daring raids and sabotage missions against key Council targets. They struck swiftly and without warning, using hit-and-run tactics to inflict maximum damage before disappearing back into the shadows. The Council's forces, used to fighting large-scale battles against other organized militaries, were caught off guard by the Resistance's guerrilla warfare approach. One of the Resistance's most audacious operations was the infiltration of a heavily guarded Council research facility. A team of elite human operatives managed to penetrate the facility's defenses and make their way to a top-secret laboratory. There, they discovered evidence that the Council had been experimenting on children with genetic modifications, trying to create super soldiers to crush any opposition to their rule. The operatives managed to free a group of young test subjects, but were discovered in the process. A fierce firefight ensued as the humans fought their way out of the facility, the children in tow. Though several resistance fighters lost their lives, they managed to get the youngsters to safety. The information and footage they brought back was dynamite, further stoking the fires of rebellion across human space. Faced with the Resistance's mounting attacks and the growing unrest among their subjugated populations, the Galactic Council decided it was time to take off the gloves. They began to crack down hard on any hint of dissent, using terror, torture, and mass arrests to try to quell the uprising. Entire planets were placed under martial law, with Council troops given free rein to brutalize civilians in the name of maintaining order. But the Council's iron-fisted tactics only served to swell the Resistance's ranks as more and more people, both human and alien, came to see the truth about their oppressors. In secret meetings and encrypted transmissions, the Resistance made contact with rebel groups on other worlds, forging an alliance of the oppressed against their common enemy. As the conflict escalated, the Council sought to strike a decisive blow against the heart of the insurgency. Using information extracted from captured rebels, they managed to locate the Resistance's hidden asteroid base. A massive Council fleet soon arrived in the system, ready to blast the human stronghold into oblivion. But the Resistance had been expecting such a move and had prepared accordingly. As the Council ships closed in, the humans sprang their trap. A cadre of rebel-controlled ships, masquerading as part of the Council fleet, suddenly turned on their erstwhile allies, sowing confusion and chaos. At the same time, a swarm of unmanned drone fighters launched from hidden hangars on the asteroid, overwhelming the Council's defenses with their sheer numbers. In the ensuing battle, the Council fleet was routed, forced to flee back to their own space with heavy losses. It was a stunning victory for the Resistance, one that sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The myth of the Council's invincibility had been shattered, and more worlds began to openly defy their rule. But the humans knew that this was only the beginning. The wounded Council would surely retaliate with all the terrible force at their command. If the Resistance was to have any hope of ultimate victory, they would need to find a way to level the playing field, and soon. The search for a game-changing weapon began in earnest as the Shadow War raged on across the stars. Emboldened by their stunning victory against the Galactic Council's fleet, the human resistance decided it was time to take the fight to the enemy. They began to plan a series of coordinated strikes against key council targets, aiming to disrupt their operations and weaken their grip on power. One of the most important targets was a heavily fortified council communications hub located on a barren, inhospitable world. This facility was responsible for coordinating the council's military and intelligence activities across a wide swath of the galaxy. If the resistance could take it out, it would deal a serious blow to their enemy's ability to wage war. A team of elite human operatives was assembled for the mission, each one hand-picked for their skills and experience. They underwent intensive training, honing their combat abilities and familiarizing themselves with the layout of the target. Everything was planned down to the last detail, leaving nothing to chance. When the time came, the Resistance strike team launched their attack with ruthless precision. They hit the communications hub hard and fast, using a combination of stealth, hacking, and brute force to overcome its defenses. Council troops were caught off guard, scrambling to respond to the sudden onslaught. In the chaos of the battle, the human operatives fought their way into the heart of the facility, planting explosive charges as they went. But as they were preparing to make their escape, they stumbled upon a shocking discovery. A group of high-ranking council officials, including several key military leaders, were present at the hub for a top-secret meeting. The resistance fighters quickly seized the opportunity, taking the council VIPs hostage at gunpoint. With their valuable prisoners in tow, the humans fought their way back out of the facility, detonating their charges behind them. The resulting explosion destroyed the communications hub, leaving a gaping crater in the planet's surface. News of the daring raid spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy. Not only had the Resistance struck a major blow against the Council's infrastructure, but they had also managed to capture some of their most important leaders. It was a humiliating defeat for the Council, one that sent shockwaves through their ranks. In the aftermath of the attack, the Council's response was swift and brutal. They launched a massive counteroffensive against human-controlled worlds, seeking to crush the Resistance once and for all. Entire planets were bombarded from orbit, reduced to rubble by the Council's mighty warships. Ground troops poured into human cities, engaging in vicious street-to-street fighting with Resistance forces. But even in the face of this overwhelming onslaught, the humans refused to surrender. They fought back with everything they had, using guerrilla tactics and hit-and-run attacks to bleed the Council's forces dry. In the ruins of their shattered cities, the Resistance fighters dug in, determined to make the enemy pay for every inch of ground. As the battle raged on, the Resistance's scientists and engineers worked feverishly to develop new weapons and technologies that could turn the tide of the war. They analyzed the captured Council equipment, reverse engineering their advanced tech in the hopes of finding a weakness to exploit. And then, in a hidden laboratory deep underground, they had a breakthrough. The Resistance researchers discovered a way to combine human and alien technology to create a devastating new weapon, one that could potentially neutralize the Council's military advantage. It was a risky gambit, but one that could change the course of the war. As word of this discovery spread through the Resistance's ranks, a sense of renewed hope and determination took hold. The humans began to plan their next move, a daring offensive that would take the fight to the very heart of the Council's power. But even as they prepared for the final battle, they knew that the road ahead would be long and bloody. The Council would not give up its power easily, and many more lives would be lost before the war was over. Still, the Resistance fighters steeled themselves for the struggle to come, knowing that they were fighting not just for themselves, but for the future of all the galaxy's oppressed peoples. The stage was set for a confrontation that would decide the fate of billions. The Galactic Council, reeling from the humiliating capture of their leaders by the human Resistance, lashed out with all the terrible force at their command. They unleashed a blitzkrieg of devastation upon the human-controlled worlds, determined to crush the rebellion once and for all. Massive Council warships darkened the skies over planet after planet, raining down destruction from orbit. Armies of heavily armed Council troops, backed by fearsome alien war machines, marched across the burning landscapes, slaughtering all who stood in their way. The human defenders fought back bravely, but they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. In the face of this overwhelming onslaught, the resistance was forced to abandon many of its strongholds and go to ground. They scattered to the far corners of the galaxy, seeking refuge in hidden bases and secret sanctuaries. From these concealed locations, they continued to wage a guerrilla war against the Council, striking hard and then fading away before the enemy could respond. But despite their tenacity, the resistance was slowly losing ground. The Council's forces, driven by a ruthless determination to eradicate all opposition, pressed their advantage relentlessly. Human colonies were overrun, their populations enslaved or massacred. Resistance cells were hunted down and destroyed, their members tortured for information before being executed. In the darkest hour of the war, the Resistance's leaders gathered for an emergency summit in a secret location. They knew that they were facing annihilation unless they could find a way to turn the tide of the conflict. Desperate for any advantage, they pinned their hopes on the work of their scientists, who had been toiling ceaselessly to unlock the secrets of the Council's advanced technology. And then, in a moment of stunning serendipity, the breakthrough came. The Resistance researchers had finally succeeded in reverse engineering the Council's most powerful weapon, a device that could generate a cascading field of dark energy, capable of destroying entire fleets of ships or rendering whole planets uninhabitable. The implications were staggering. With this weapon in their hands, the Resistance could finally stand toe-to-toe with the Council's military might. They could turn the tables on their oppressors and bring the war to the enemy's own doorstep. But even as the Resistance leaders celebrated this game-changing development, they knew that deploying such a terrible weapon was a grave responsibility. They agonized over the moral implications, knowing that using it would cause untold destruction and loss of life on both sides. In the end, they made the difficult decision to move forward with the plan. They knew that the stakes were too high to hold back, that the fate of countless billions depended on their actions. The Resistance began to secretly manufacture the dark energy weapons, stockpiling them for the final offensive that would decide the war. At the same time, they launched a daring mission to rescue their captured leaders from the Council's clutches. A small team of elite operatives, equipped with the latest stealth technology and armed with the new dark energy weapons, infiltrated the heavily guarded prison where the Council VIPs were being held. In a lightning raid, they broke through the prison's defenses and freed the captive leaders, spiriting them away to safety. The Council, caught off guard by the audacity of the attack, could only watch in stunned disbelief as their valuable hostages slipped through their fingers. With their leadership restored and their new weapon ready, the Resistance prepared to launch their final, all-out assault on the heart of the Council's power. They knew that this was their one chance to end the war and free the galaxy from tyranny. That failure was not an option. As the fleets and armies of the Resistance mustered for the coming battle, a sense of grim determination filled their ranks. They had suffered much and lost many, but they had never lost sight of their cause. They were fighting for freedom, for justice, for the right of all sentient beings to live in peace and dignity. And so, with a mighty roar of engines and a blaze of weapons fire, the final battle for the fate of the galaxy began. The Council and the Resistance, two implacable foes locked in a struggle to the death, hurled themselves at each other with all the force and fury they could muster. The future of billions hung in the balance as the tide of war surged across the stars. As the human Resistance prepared for their final, all-out assault against the Galactic Council, they knew that they would need every advantage they could get. The Council's forces were vastly superior in numbers and firepower, and the humans would be facing an uphill battle every step of the way. Desperate for any edge, the Resistance's scientists and engineers worked around the clock to develop new weapons and technologies that could turn the tide of the war. They pored over the captured Council equipment, studying every circuit and line of code for weaknesses to exploit. And then, in a moment of brilliant inspiration, they had a breakthrough. The researchers discovered a way to combine human ingenuity with advanced alien technology to create a weapon of unparalleled power. A device that could generate a focused beam of pure energy, capable of piercing through the strongest shields and armor like a hot knife through butter. The implications were staggering. With this weapon in their hands, the Resistance fighters could take on the Council's warships and war machines on a more equal footing. They could strike at the enemy's most heavily defended targets with pinpoint precision and turn the tables on their oppressors. But the scientists knew that developing such a game-changing weapon would not be easy. They would need to gather rare and exotic materials from across the galaxy and overcome countless technical challenges and setbacks along the way. Undaunted, the Resistance set out to acquire the necessary components by any means necessary. They raided Council supply depots, intercepted alien cargo ships, and even mounted daring expeditions to uncharted regions of space. At the same time, they began to construct a network of secret factories and research facilities, hidden away in remote asteroid fields and on barren, lifeless worlds. In these hidden strongholds, the Resistance's brightest minds worked tirelessly to bring the new weapon to fruition. As the project neared completion, the Resistance's leaders knew that they would need to be cautious in deploying such a powerful and destructive technology. They agonized over the ethical implications, knowing that the use of such a weapon could have far-reaching consequences for the galaxy as a whole. In the end, they made the difficult decision to press ahead with the plan. They knew that the stakes were too high to hold back, that the fate of countless billions depended on their actions. The Resistance began to secretly manufacture the energy weapons, stockpiling them for the final offensive that would decide the war. To keep their new weapon a secret from the Council's spies, the Resistance concocted an elaborate ruse. They allowed rumors to spread that they had developed a new type of shielding technology that could render their ships and bases impervious to attack. They even staged a few carefully orchestrated demonstrations of this supposed technology, using holographic projectors and other trickery to fool the Council's observers. As word of this new wonder weapon reached the Council's leadership, they grew increasingly nervous. They knew that if the rebels truly had such a game-changing advantage, it could tip the balance of the war in their favor. Desperate to acquire this technology for themselves, the Council sent envoys to the Resistance, offering a truce and even a limited form of autonomy in exchange for the secrets of the new weapon. The Resistance leaders played along, feigning interest in the Council's overtures while secretly preparing for the final battle. And then, when the time was right, the Resistance struck. In a coordinated assault across a dozen star systems, their fleets and armies hit the Council's forces with everything they had. And at the vanguard of the attack were the new energy weapons, cutting through the enemy's defenses like a scythe through wheat. The Council, caught off guard by the sudden ferocity of the assault and the devastating power of the new weapons, reeled back in shock and disarray. Their ships were blasted out of the sky, their bases reduced to smoldering ruins, their armies cut down in droves. But even as the tide of battle turned in the Resistance's favor, they knew that the war was far from over. The Council, though badly weakened, still had vast resources and reserves to call upon. They would not go down without a fight, and the rebels would need to press their advantage relentlessly if they hoped to achieve final victory. And so, with grim determination and unwavering resolve, the human Resistance prepared for the long and bloody struggle ahead. They had come so far and sacrificed so much, but they knew that the hardest battles were yet to come. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and they would not rest until the Council's tyranny was brought to an end, once and for all. With the development of their devastating new energy weapons, the human Resistance had gained a crucial advantage in their war against the tyrannical Galactic Council, but they knew that this advantage would not last forever. The Council, though badly bruised and reeling, still had vast resources and technological might at their disposal. They would surely be working frantically to develop countermeasures and new weapons of their own. The Resistance leaders knew that they had to strike hard and fast to press their advantage before the Council could regain its footing. They began to plan a massive coordinated offensive that would hit the enemy on multiple fronts simultaneously. The goal was to overwhelm the Council's defenses, to sow chaos and confusion in their ranks, and to drive them back on their heels. To this end, the Resistance's strategists and tacticians worked around the clock, analyzing intelligence reports, studying star maps, and developing detailed battle plans. They identified key Council strongholds and supply lines, and drew up schemes to disrupt and destroy them. At the same time, the Resistance's scientists and engineers continued to refine and improve their energy weapons, making them even more powerful and efficient. They also worked on developing new technologies to enhance their ships and fighters, such as advanced cloaking devices and enhanced propulsion systems. As the preparations for the final offensive reached a fever pitch, the Resistance's leaders knew that they would need every available resource and ally to succeed. They reached out to the other oppressed peoples of the galaxy, to the downtrodden and the marginalized, and called on them to rise up against their Council oppressors. To their surprise and delight, the response was overwhelming. Species and civilizations that had long suffered under the Council's iron fist flocked to the Resistance's banner, eager to join the fight for freedom and justice. Soldiers, ships, and supplies poured in from all corners of the galaxy, swelling the ranks of the rebel forces to unprecedented levels. As the day of the offensive drew near, a sense of electric anticipation filled the air. The Resistance fighters, human and alien alike, knew that they were on the cusp of something momentous, something that would be remembered for generations to come. And then, with a massive surge of ships and weaponry, the offensive began. Across 100 star systems, Resistance fleets and armies struck at the Council's forces with devastating precision and overwhelming force. The Council's defenses, once thought impregnable, crumbled under the onslaught. The Resistance's new energy weapons proved to be every bit as effective as they had hoped. Council warships were vaporized in brilliant flashes of light, their crews incinerated before they even knew what hit them. Ground troops were cut down by searing beams of energy, their armor and flesh melting away like wax. But even as the Resistance advanced, the Council fought back with desperate ferocity. Their own ships and weapons, though outclassed, still inflicted grievous casualties on the rebel forces. Battles raged across the stars, lighting up the void with the fires of destruction. Slowly, painfully, the Resistance pushed forward, grinding down the Council's resistance with sheer tenacity and unyielding will. They captured enemy strongholds, liberated enslaved populations, and cut off the Council's supply lines one by one. And at the forefront of the advance were the Resistance's greatest heroes and champions. There was the brilliant human strategist, her mind always 3 steps ahead of the enemy. There was the fearless alien warrior, his blade carving a path of destruction through the Council's ranks. There was the maverick fighter pilot, her daring and skill legendary among friend and foe alike. Together, these heroes and countless others like them led the charge, inspiring their comrades with their courage and determination. They knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, that many more would fall before the final victory was won. But they also knew that they were fighting for something greater than themselves, for the freedom and dignity of all the peoples of the galaxy. And so, with fire in their hearts and steel in their spines, the soldiers of the human resistance pressed on, towards the final confrontation with the Council and the ultimate fate of the galaxy itself. The final battle between the human resistance and the Galactic Council raged across the stars, a cataclysmic confrontation that would determine the fate of billions. On one side stood the forces of tyranny and oppression, a mighty empire that had held sway over the galaxy for centuries. On the other side stood the champions of freedom and justice, a ragtag alliance of rebels and revolutionaries, fighting for the right to determine their own destiny. The Resistance knew that this was their one chance to end the Council's reign of terror once and for all. They threw everything they had into the battle, every ship, every soldier, every weapon at their disposal. The Council, in turn, fought back with all the fury and desperation of a cornered beast, unleashing the full might of their vast war machine upon the rebel forces. Across 100 worlds, the battle rage, the very fabric of space and time seeming to bend and warp under the strain of the titanic forces unleashed. Fleets of ships clashed in the void, their hulls glowing white-hot with the heat of 1,000 suns. Armies of soldiers and war machines grappled on the surface of planets, turning once verdant fields and cities into blasted, corpse-strewn wastelands. At the forefront of the Resistance's forces were their greatest heroes and champions, leading the charge against the Council's most formidable defenders. There was the human commander, a tactical genius whose brilliant stratagems and daring gambits had turned the tide of countless battles. There was the alien warrior queen, her lithe form a blur of deadly motion as she carved a path of destruction through the enemy ranks. There was the cybernetic super soldier, his mechanical limbs and enhanced senses making him a one-man army on the battlefield. Together, these heroes and countless others like them fought with a ferocity and determination that struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. They pushed themselves to the limits of their endurance and beyond, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. But even as the Resistance advanced, the Council's forces fought back with equal ferocity. Their most elite warriors, genetically engineered and cybernetically enhanced to the peak of perfection, met the Resistance champions in single combat, their blades and blasters flashing in a deadly dance of skill and courage. The tide of battle ebbed and flowed, with both sides gaining and losing ground in a series of desperate clashes. Ships exploded in the void, raining debris and shattered bodies upon the surfaces of planets below. Cities burned, their once proud towers and spires reduced to rubble and ash. Countless lives were lost, both human and alien, as the war machine ground on with relentless, merciless efficiency. But through it all, the Resistance refused to yield. They fought on with grim determination, even as their numbers dwindled and their strength waned. They knew that they were fighting not just for themselves, but for the future of all the oppressed peoples of the galaxy. And then, in a final desperate gambit, the Resistance unleashed their ultimate weapon. A massive planet-shattering explosion that ripped through the heart of the Council's power, destroying their central command and control in a single blinding instant. The Council's forces, suddenly bereft of leadership and direction, fell into chaos and disarray. Seizing the moment, the Resistance surged forward, overwhelming the Council's remaining defenses and driving them back in a relentless, unstoppable advance. The Council's leaders, seeing the writing on the wall, fled for their lives, abandoning their troops and their empire to the mercy of the victorious rebels. And as the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the Resistance emerged triumphant, the Council's once mighty empire lying shattered and broken at their feet. The galaxy had been freed from the yoke of tyranny, and a new era of hope and possibility had dawned. But even as the Resistance celebrated their victory, they knew that the work of building a new and better future had only just begun. There would be wounds to heal, wrongs to right, and a galaxy to rebuild. But they also knew that they had proven, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the power of unity, courage, and hope could overcome even the darkest of tyrannies. And so, with heads held high and hearts filled with joy, the soldiers of the human Resistance looked to the stars, ready to face whatever challenges and opportunities the future might bring.